All three properties going to auction today will present some real challenges.
In our previous video, we covered how public transport in Belfast progressed in a backwards manner over the course of 100 years, starting with electric trams in the late 1800s before downgrading to diesel buses from the 1960s onwards. But following the creation of Translink in 1986 and their decision to rebrand CityBus to Metro in 2005, public transport development started to take a turn for the better heading into the new millennium. In today's video, we will be explaining how Metro quickly rose to prominence and why the Department for Infrastructure opted to invest in a bus rapid transit service instead of reintegrating light rail to Belfast streets. With Metro at the helm, it was now finally time to modernise the Belfast bus network left over from the CityBus era. The first major change was the livery update. CityBus's usual red and white sweetie wrapper style livery had become a dated sight and looked rather out of place with Belfast's modern surroundings. Metro solved this issue by painting all of their buses in a new, striking bright pink livery. The change had a mixed reaction, with older residents that had grown fond of their beloved red and white high-floor buses, whereas younger people preferred the more lively and friendly pink colour scheme. One closet politician, however, decided to launch an attack on the Metro rebrand, with a headline that read, "What are they, gay buses?" Ironically though, the pink livery has been draped in the pride flag for many a parade over the years, a true testament to how Northern Ireland has moved further and further away from religion politics and more towards real issues like human rights and socio-economic problems. Alongside the dazzling pink rebrand, Metro aimed to completely rejuvenate the road arm of the public transport sector in Belfast. They laid out 12 quality bus corridors that stretched from end to end of the city and created a spiderweb-like service that allows everyone in the city to access cheap, frequent bus services within walking distance of their home. However, reliability often suffers when it comes to Metro services at no fault of their own, with Belfast being the UK's 5th most congested city, despite it being the 10th largest city in the UK, based on 2020 data. It comes as no surprise that the insane levels of motorcar congestion has led to Metro bus services being delayed at peak times, especially since the city's bus lanes have poor regulations and see a lack of proper enforcement, which leads to them being filled with parked cars or even more traffic. On the day of Metro's launch, Translink received 540 complaints from users due to late running buses, but despite that setback, Translink declared the rebrand a total success as they saw an increase in ridership of 6.3%. From the rebrand launch date and onwards until the 2010s, Metro quickly phased out all of their old high-floor buses for newer models, most of which were double and single deck buses bodied by Wrightbus, a world-renowned coach builder nestled in the outskirts of Ballymena in the townland of Galgorm. Through the 2010s, Metro's other old buses were now starting to need replacement as public transport technology, and what was considered adequate, changed rapidly. Most notably, the fleet of ALX 400 double-deck buses were fairly outdated, as their production came to an 8-year close 1 year after Metro's rebrand, and thanks to Wrightbus making waves all over the world, they ended up producing the majority of the new buses yet again. Newer buses were also starting to be deployed with the latest in passenger comfort technology also, from improved air conditioning to USB charging ports and free Wi-Fi on all Metro services, along with automated next stop announcements. But there was one seriously large hole that Metro would not be able to change without a serious left hook to back up its right: reliability. Initially, there was a certain level of work put into the idea of reintegrating trams to Belfast's road network. Much like the wildly successful Lewis tram service in Dublin, trams need serious prioritisation and thus are far more reliable than buses. The proposal was to connect the city centre to Cumber via the old BCDR line that now sits the Cumber Greenway. But as you can imagine, getting rid of a greenway is extremely difficult, even if the benefits vastly outweigh the negatives, much like this case. The plan was then scrapped and other options were surveyed, but in the end nothing ever came of it. Now there is very limited information on what really happened behind closed doors, as the government is never terribly keen on publishing the plans for field projects and the likes, but most people I have spoken to that are knowledgeable on the subject agree that the most likely cause for the return of trams to be scrapped was the Department for Infrastructure's lust for road priority. This made the idea of closing the roads for months, or in a lot of cases permanently, for the purpose of installing expensive tram tracks and overhead wires too much for their multi-billion pound yearly budget. Instead, the DFI then looked towards what they know worst: roads. After some banging of pots and pans, the DFI decided that their best approach was to go for the Bus Rapid Transit model. Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT for short, is a system of public transport that is used worldwide instead of tram networks. But why would you choose a glorified bendy bus over light rail transit? Well, firstly, BRT systems cost much less in setup costs than LRT. For example, the cost for the glider infrastructure and rolling stock came at a price tag of £100 million, whereas the cost for, let's say, Edinburgh's tram network cost around £775 million, and the Edinburgh tram network was about 4 miles shorter than the glider network at the time of launch. Bus Rapid Transit also has the smaller benefits of not being confined to rails and thus can manoeuvre around any obstacles in the way. But this is also partially an irrelevant benefit, as tram tracks, when built properly, are on car-free streets or roads and as such won't encounter an obstacle as often as a BRT would. The main drawbacks that face the BRT model is the speed and reliability. Because an LRT system bypasses almost all of the traffic on the roads, it can achieve much higher average speeds, up to 50% faster than buses of any kind. The glider may have proper dedicated bus lanes, but it is still subject to traffic and congestion at junctions and traffic lights. This obviously then boosts the reliability and frequency of the LRT network tenfold also, as it is far less impeded by congestion and traffic, meaning less delays and even cheaper fares brought on by the increased passenger flow that is induced by the aforementioned reliability and frequency. The perfect circle. But what about the long term? Well, that is where things get even better for LRT. Since light rail transit uses dedicated tracks, away from roads and cars majority of the time, this keeps operating costs to a minimum. Trams are generally electrically driven via overhead wires and a pantograph, and electricity is a lot cheaper than diesel. Plus, with the lack of rubber tyres, moving parts and the lack of risk of collisions, maintenance costs are also slashed to a minimum in comparison to BRT. This means that LRT networks can actually turn a serious profit, as the previously mentioned Edinburgh tram network turned a profit of £1.6 million in 2017, 2 whole years before it was anticipated that it would do so, and only 3 years after its launch. But that's not to say the glider, or BRT in general, cannot turn a profit, but their profit margin is far less of what an LRT can achieve in the long haul. So it is much like a case of yin and yang. Which do you think is better? Regardless to the long-term benefits of light rail transit, the Department for Infrastructure went ahead with their BRT idea. From 2014 to 2015, the DFI constructed the first few pieces of the infrastructure required to operate the new service. In late 2015, the Northern Ireland Executive then gave the project the full green light, and construction was ramped up. Through 2016 and 2017, the route started to take shape with shelters, new bus lanes, and new bus lane regulations for the BRT network, which are a step up from the current metro bus lane network. These new bus lane regulations saw the hours of operation, where private car traffic cannot enter the lane, extended to a more all-day system of 7 AM to 7 PM Monday to Saturday. Not perfect, but still a major improvement. If you contrast this to most of the current metro bus lanes, whose hours of operations are only for the morning commuting hours of 7:30am to 9:30am Monday to Friday, then I am sure you can imagine what those bus lanes are like come the evening rush hour. When 2018 finally rolled around, the glider was about ready for its big debut. Translink even hosted a sort of open day for locals and enthusiasts alike to come and sample the new glider rolling stock, which are Van Hool Expo City bendy buses. Then on the 28th of August 2018, the glider conducted its first trial services for paying passengers, which was considered a success. And then, on the 3rd of September 2018, the glider went into full operation. Since the glider's launch, it has been in the hot seat of controversy, with over 250 accidents in the past 5 years, many of which resulted in people with minor injuries. One man was even given a settlement of £17,500 after being thrown from his seat when a glider he was travelling on made an emergency stop to avoid colliding with a clueless motorist. One accident in particular took place a month before the glider began operation, when one of the new buses was on a test run and ran aground when trying to turn the corner into the Mile Water Service Centre in Duncrew. In fact, on the very first day of operation, the glider had already been involved in 3 prior collisions with other vehicles, not including the one previously mentioned, one of which occurred when a driver in training reversed the glider into another bus inside of a bus depot, which caused hundreds of pounds worth of damage. Translink made a statement in 2019 that read, Glider vehicle collisions have largely been caused by other motorists. Another pressing issue with the glider is the abnormal level of antisocial behaviour that seems to have no real common denominator, as many online posts and videos have shown people of all ages and backgrounds committing various crimes against other people, as well as Translink staff themselves whilst on board the glider. In fact, as of April 2022, 53 Translink staff have been physically assaulted by members of the public whilst being on the job as drivers or ticket inspectors. More recently, on the 7th of May 2023, 2 glider staff members were violently assaulted at the glider halt at Lanyon Place railway station by members of the public, which was the fourth assault against glider staff that week. Obviously, these disgusting and cowardly attacks on innocent working people are terribly complex and they go far deeper than the glider's baked-in issues, but it is still a massive problem that must be tackled. But what about the more practical issues with the glider system? Does it operate well and at the highest level of efficiency possible? Well, to start off on a positive note, in my personal experience, the glider is very user-friendly. The ticketing machines at each stop or halt are very easy to use and straightforward when comparing them to the likes of the Lewis in Dublin, which can be rather confusing when you wish to travel between zones. The glider is also rather quiet, comfortable and very pleasant to travel in, but with it being a hybrid it can still get somewhat noisy when the diesel engine roars to life. The glider is also very punctual and, like the name suggests, rapid, but the current congestion in Belfast city centre is by far the biggest thing that is essentially shooting the BRT in the foot and preventing it from being truly outstanding from a generic metro bus service. Arguably, the glider's biggest issue is poor traffic prioritisation. Aside from the improved bus lanes, the glider is essentially not prioritised over regular motor vehicle traffic to a satisfactory level. When there's a junction ahead and the light is on red, you can bet that your glider will have to sit at the traffic light until the signal turns green. Now, I have been informed that the glider and metro services are fitted with signal priority systems, which work by using an optical emitter attached to the top of the buses. Then, as the bus approaches a junction on red, the optical emitter transmits a beam of infrared light to an optical detector connected to the traffic lights. The optical detector then sends a priority request signal down to a signal control system that will then change the lights accordingly to the situation, allowing the bus to cross the junction without stopping. However, I believe the glider uses a GPS-based version of the system that works via the same principle to avoid people hijacking the traffic priority system with homemade infrared light emitters for their own benefit. This system alone should improve the glider's journey times and frequency significantly, as it would virtually rule out the chances of the bus rapid transit system getting caught up at a red light junction. But still, the glider will always end up sitting at a red light as if the system doesn't work or isn't turned on. One other major issue is poor bus lane enforcement. The glider bus lanes are a serious improvement from the metro ones, as we mentioned before, but Belfast lacks fixed bus lane cameras, and this results in people illegally parking in the bus lanes, at bus stops, or just driving in the lanes to unfairly skip traffic, thus holding the services up by way of unnecessary congestion. The best way physically and practically possible to rectify this dilemma is to make all bus lanes in Belfast have their hours of operation extended to match the first and last buses of the day. Then, to partner that change, install fixed bus lane cameras along every bus lane at intervals of something like every 0.5 to 2.5 miles, increasing bus lane fines to double their current tariff, and giving drivers a serious amount of points on their licence would also be a good idea, as clogging bus lanes with illegal traffic costs everybody time, money and their health, as idling vehicles mean a lot of extra unnecessary pollution. But we will discuss other, better solutions to the glider's problems in part 3. Now back to the metro improvements. After the glider hit the busy streets of Belfast, Translink looked to modernise the metro fleet even further, with Wrightbus yet again building the majority of the new buses. However, a serious financial collapse cast the future of Wrightbus into doubt. Between September and October of 2019, Wrightbus went into administration as it had amassed a debt of around £60 million. Almost 40 million of which was owed to the Bank of Ireland. The cause of this financial collapse was the company's owner, Jeff Wright, spending the 6 years prior donating £15 million to the Green Pastures Church, a church which he had founded himself back in 2007. The reason he had donated such a massive sum of company money to his own church was to build a new headquarters for Green Pastures, which would act as not only a church, but a business park, training centre, social and student housing, nursing home and retail premises. When this information got out, Wrightbus employees and even members of the Wright family themselves staged protests, as the company had to lay off 1,300 jobs due to administration. Thanks to Jeff's corporate embezzlement collapsing Wrightbus nearly out of existence, the Green Pastures HQ was never completely finished. To this day, it sits on a site of wasteland on the totally not narcissistically named 1 Faith Avenue in Ballymena. After Wrightbus was put into administration on the 11th of October 2019, the son of the chairman for JCB, Joe Bamford, bought the company and saved Wrightbus from being recited to the history books. After Joe's opportune takeover, Wrightbus started to focus on building zero-emission buses, starting with a brand new model of hydrogen-fueled street-deck double-deck buses. At the same time, Translink were looking to depollute their bus network, starting with Belfast. In 2020, Translink took delivery of some of the world's first ever fully hydrogen double-decker buses. From 2020 until today, Metro has steadily replaced many of their diesel Wrightbus models with newer electric ones. They even went as far as to revive the double-door double-deck bus in the city, something that has been absent for many years. And whilst we are on the topic of a zero-emission bus network, Translink very recently started to roll out a fully electrified bus network for the Foyle Metro service, which was originally launched in 2017 and replaced the former Ulsterbus Foyle network that serves the city of Londonderry and its surrounding areas. Foyle Metro is quite literally Metro 2.0 and operates a similar but slightly larger system to that of Belfast's, with 13 key bus corridors and an extra 14th corridor that has 3 variations of A, B and C that help give Derry its own vast spiderweb-like bus metro service. However, I have not sampled the metro services in Derry enough to provide a robust analysis, but if you have identified positive or negative aspects of the Foyle Metro model, then feel free to comment below, as I may use some of the points given in a bonus section of part 3 when we discuss the potential for the revival of trams in Northern Ireland. As for the future of both metro services and Ulsterbus as a whole, well, Translink wish to introduce zero-emission coaches to our Gold Line network by 2032, with a completely zero-emission bus and rail network coming by 2040. But as for the future of the glider, that is what we will discuss in great detail in part 3, so stick around and don't forget to turn on post notifications by clicking the bell icon underneath this video so you don't miss it when it rolls through the door. As always, thank you for watching, and goodbye.